Every time you rinse a yogurt tub, crush a milk bottle, and proudly wheel that yellow bin to the curb, you are playing your part in a story that, for plastics at least, is almost completely broken. In this video, we are exposing how Australia's so-called world-class recycling system quietly turns your good intentions into landfill, overseas dumping, and corporate public relations. And at the end, I will show you the few moves that actually do protect your family, your food, and your future. We grew up being told recycling was the answer. School posters, council flyers, feel-good advertisements with kids rinsing jars and dolphins leaping in clean oceans. The message was simple. You put your packaging in the right bin, they turn it into new stuff. Problem solved. But here is the part nobody talks about. The latest national data shows only about 12 to 14% of Australia's plastic waste is actually recycled in practice. For plastic packaging specifically, the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation's own tracking shows a recycling rate stuck at around 19 to 20%, against a national target of 70% by 2025. At the same time, our total plastic waste keeps growing, with recent reports putting it at around 3.2 million tonnes a year and rising. So while you are carefully sorting, most of that plastic is still being buried in Australian landfills, shipped overseas for someone else to deal with, or stockpiled because there is nowhere for it to go. On the surface, it looks like a circular system. Underneath, a lot of Australians now feel like they have been roped into a feel-good performance that lets big brands pump out more plastic and slap green arrows on the side. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you look at every recyclable logo on your supermarket trolley. The yellow bin that lies to you. Let us start with the one thing almost every Australian household has in common. The yellow lid recycling bin on the curb. We have been told for decades that this bin is our main weapon. But when you zoom out, the numbers become brutal. According to recent national analyses of Australia's waste system, only around 12.6 to 14% of our plastic waste is recycled at all. Industry-backed tracking found plastic packaging recycling hovering at about 19 to 20%, despite the official target of 70% of plastic packaging to be recycled or composted by 2025. In plain English, out of every 10 pieces of plastic you use, 8 or 9 are not becoming new products, no matter how carefully you sort them. Why? Because recyclable on a packet means it could be recycled under perfect conditions. It does not mean your council or state actually has the equipment, markets, or economics to do it. Glass and aluminium do relatively well. Paper and cardboard are reasonable. But plastic is a different beast. There are hundreds of different polymers, often colored, layered, and covered in labels, glues, and food residue, and some are technically recyclable, but effectively worthless to processors. National reviews have highlighted 4 big problems. There is not enough local reprocessing capacity, sorting by households is inconsistent, contaminated loads are often diverted to landfill, and brand new virgin plastic is frequently cheaper than recycled plastic pellets. The bin suggests you did your bit, job done. The system reality is you did your bit, and then we still buried, burned, or exported most of it anyway. And if you think that is bad, it gets worse when we talk about all the extra plastic you went out of your way to recycle. The soft plastics disaster that broke public trust. For years, Australians took their chip packets, bread bags, and cling wrap back to Coles and Woolworths, dropping them into bright soft plastics bins run by the Red Cycle program. It felt like a win. Soft plastics sorted, supermarkets and governments promoted it as a key solution to plastic waste. In late 2022 and 2023, the truth came out. Investigations and enforcement action revealed that large amounts of red cycle material had been stockpiled in warehouses for months, while customers were still being encouraged to drop off more soft plastic. Reports from regulators and the media described soft plastics that were not being recycled at all, but instead moved from collection points to multiple warehouses and left sitting in huge hidden piles. In New South Wales alone, the State Environment Protection Authority ordered Coles and Woolworths to deal with more than 5,000 tonnes of recycled plastic stored across 15 warehouses, much of it initially destined for landfill because there was no processing capacity. Across Australia, environment agencies later confirmed that the collapse of the program had left roughly 11,000 tonnes of soft plastics sitting across about 44 locations nationwide. Clean-up notices were issued and a national task force was set up just to figure out what to do with this mountain of material. Customers felt blindsided. For years, they had washed their bags, sorted their wrappers, and hauled soft plastic back to supermarkets, believing they were protecting turtles and oceans. Instead, a large share of that material never made it into actual recycling streams that turned it into new products. RedCycle has said it paused collections and stored plastics at great expense while downstream recyclers failed and markets dried up. But for ordinary Australians, the damage was done. The scheme collapsed, bins were removed, and trust in recycling solutions for soft plastics was shattered. If a flagship supermarket-backed solution can quietly stack up 11,000 tonnes of plastic with no clear way to turn it into something useful, what does that say about the rest of the system? And if you are thinking, well, at least if it leaves my bin and goes overseas to be recycled, that is still good for the planet, this is where things get really uncomfortable. The export trick, when recycling just means someone else's problem. After China banned most waste imports in 2017 and 2018, Australia's plastic and mixed waste exports did not stop. They shifted. An Australian Broadcasting Corporation investigation in 2019 found that Australian waste exports to Indonesia's East Java province jumped sharply after the China ban, with imports of waste materials from Australia reaching 52,000 tonnes in 2018 alone, a 250% increase from 2014. Local environmental group Ecoton alleged that bales of used paper imported from Australia often contained up to 30% plastic waste and household rubbish, even though Indonesian rules were supposed to limit contamination to about 2%. What happened to that so-called recyclable Australian plastic? Campaigners documented it being burned in open piles, dumped into the Brantus River, and left to break down and enter local food chains through fish and drinking water. In response to scandals like this, the previous Australian government announced a phased ban on exporting certain waste plastics, paper, glass and tyres, arguing that we needed to build onshore recycling instead of dumping problems on our neighbours. But in 2023, environment groups reported that, on the eve of new global plastics treaty negotiations in Paris, the federal environment minister had decided to reopen some plastic waste exports by granting exemptions, effectively rolling back part of the earlier ban. The Australia Institute has also pointed out that only a small share of Australia's plastic waste is recovered, around 14% in recent years, and that recovery rates have been flat or declining over the past 2 decades, even as waste volumes climb. Scrapping proposed export levies and reopening export pathways makes it easier again for companies to ship waste offshore rather than build enough domestic capacity to deal with it properly. So when a brand says 100% recyclable packaging and that package lands in your yellow bin, a significant share of the time recycling has meant being bailed up, put on a ship, sent to countries with weaker waste systems, and too often burned, dumped or lost to the environment. Australians get to feel eco-responsible. Other communities get the smoke, the toxic ash, the plastic-choked rivers and damaged fisheries. If that does not feel like a scam, what would? And yet the labels on the packets keep getting greener, because now we are in the era of official greenwashing crackdowns. The greenwashing machine How brands turn your guilt into marketing. Companies know you feel uneasy about plastic. They also know you want to keep buying the same products. Enter the green label boom. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission and the Australian Securities and Investments Commission have both said that environmental claims and greenwashing are now major enforcement priorities. Regulators have issued detailed guidance warning companies not to overstate how recyclable their packaging is, not to use vague words like green, eco-friendly or sustainable without solid evidence, and not to make bold claims on the front that tiny disclaimers on the back quietly undermine. Then in 2024, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission went to the federal court in its first dedicated greenwashing case. One high-profile example is Clorox Australia, maker of Glad garbage bags, which is facing proceedings over claims that some bags contained 50% ocean plastic and were Glad to be green. The regulator alleges that the bags actually used recycled plastic collected from communities in Indonesia up to 50 kilometers from the shoreline, not plastic retrieved directly from the ocean or sea, and that this would likely mislead consumers about the real environmental benefit. The case is still before the courts, so we cannot jump to conclusions, but it shows you how razor-thin the line can be between technically true but emotionally misleading and straight-up deceptive marketing. Zoom out and you see the pattern. Recycled content labels on products that still generate waste at the end of life. Recyclable logos on plastics with no realistic pathway to be recycled in current Australian systems. Brands shouting about taking a little plastic out of the system while quietly pouring mountains more into it. Meanwhile, official reports keep confirming that only about 1 in 5 pieces of plastic packaging is actually getting recycled, and overall plastic recovery is stuck down around 12 to 14%. The slogans say, "Recycle and feel good." The data says, recycling alone is not saving you or your kids from a future filled with microplastics in the air, water, and food chain. So if the yellow bin is limited, soft plastic schemes collapse, exports shift the harm and labels play games. What actually works? The few parts of the system that are doing something, and why it is not enough to be fair. It is not all doom. Recent packaging and waste data shows that Australia's domestic reprocessing capacity for many materials has nearly doubled since around 2018 to 2019. And container deposit schemes for bottles and cans have almost doubled their recovery through depots and reverse vending machines. Single-use high-density polyethylene shopping bags have almost entirely disappeared from major retailers, and some problematic plastics like certain polyvinyl chloride packaging and oxo-degradable bags have dropped sharply. On paper, that is progress. The Federal National Plastics Plan 2021 also promises to more than double annual recycling capacity by 2025. Backed by hundreds of millions of dollars in a recycling modernization fund and related programs. But here is where the scam feeling creeps back in. Even with all those investments and bans, only roughly 19 to 20% of plastic packaging is being recycled, still miles off the 70% target. And only around 12 to 14% of total plastic waste is being recovered at all. The volume of plastic waste we generate each year keeps going up, not down. It is like bailing out a boat while someone else drills new holes in the hull. Container deposit schemes show that when you put a clear value on an item, make drop-off simple, and build dedicated infrastructure, you can get decent recovery rates. But we have not applied that same seriousness to most food packaging, household products, online shopping waste, or most of what touches your family's food every single day. So right now, the system looks like this. You get lectures about rinsing your hummus tub properly. They keep selling you strawberries in black plastic trays wrapped in film that no curbside system will touch. You carry the guilt. They keep the profit. That is the real heart of the recycling scam feeling in Australia. Not that recycling itself is fake, but that it has been oversold as the solution, while companies and policymakers drag their feet on the only thing that really works, making less throwaway plastic in the first place. So what can you actually do that is not theatre? Now let us talk about the moves that actually protect your family. You cannot personally fix national recycling policy, but you can stop being the easy mark this system relies on. Here is how to shift from bin-based guilt to real-world impact while still living a normal Australian life. Step 1. Put reduction above recycling, especially for food packaging. For anything that touches your plate, produce snacks, pantry staples, flip your default. Your first question becomes, can I avoid this packaging altogether? Second, if not, what is the least plastic option? Third, only then is it actually recyclable where I live. Practical examples. Buy loose fruit and vegetables instead of pre-wrapped trays where you can. Choose glass jars or tins for things like passata, beans, tuna and sauces over soft pouches and plastic tubs. Skip the multi-pack snack bags and decant a big bag into small containers at home. Glass and metal have much higher real-world recycling rates and simpler processing streams than mixed plastics. Step 2. Treat recyclable logos as maybes, not guarantees. When a packet shouts 100% recyclable, remember that means in theory, somewhere, not necessarily in your council's yellow bin this week. Do this instead. Check your local council's actual accepted items list. Use state-run recycling information websites or apps where they exist. If an item is technically recyclable but not accepted locally, treat it as waste, not a virtue signal. This small mindset shift breaks the emotional spell that brands rely on. Step 3. Favor genuinely lower waste products and businesses. Without naming and shaming, you can quietly support supermarkets and local grocers that sell more produce loose, stock bulk bins or refill stations, and offer paper or cardboard where others use plastic. Buy from brands that publish hard numbers on recycled content. Take back schemes and actual recycling rates, not just leafy logos and vague claims. Australia's competition and corporate regulators are increasingly challenging flimsy environmental claims, so serious brands are being forced to back up their promises with data. You can reward the ones who do. Step 4. Use the systems that do work properly. Some parts of Australia's recycling infrastructure are worth leaning into. Container deposit schemes for drink cans and bottles consistently recover a higher proportion than curbside systems alone. Clean cardboard and paper in the yellow bin generally have stronger domestic markets and higher recovery than mixed plastics. Make those streams as clean as you can. Rinse and empty bottles. Keep lids on or off, according to what your local scheme asks for. Do not contaminate paper loads with food-soiled cardboard. You are helping the parts of the system that are already under strain work a little closer to how they were sold to you. Step 5. Talk about the real problem, production, not bins. Perhaps the most powerful thing you can do is stop letting the conversation end at, "Am I recycling right?" When the topic comes up with friends, schools, or on social media, push one level deeper. Ask why there are 3 layers of plastic on this product in the first place. Ask why it is still cheaper for companies to use virgin plastic than recycled plastic. Ask why we are reopening waste exports while telling kids that recycling is enough. Politicians and companies watch what voters actually talk about. If the pressure stays stuck at the household bin level, that is where they will keep the focus. When the pressure shifts to caps on virgin plastic, mandatory recycled content, and targets and penalties that bite at the production end, that is when the scammy feeling starts to break. Final message and call to action. Recycling itself is not the scam. The scam-like part is the story we have been sold, that if you and your kids rinse containers, Memorize bin colors and carry soft plastics back to the supermarket. You can keep buying and binning at today's levels and the planet will somehow cope. The data says otherwise. Decades into the recycling era, only about 1 in 8 pieces of plastic we use is actually recycled. Soft plastic solutions like RedCycle collapsed under the weight of their own stockpiles, with around 11,000 tons left sitting in limbo across dozens of sites. Exports have turned recycling into smoke, ash and polluted rivers in countries that never bought the product in the first place. And regulators are now openly cracking down on brands whose green claims are more marketing than substance. We went from glass milk bottles you returned and simple packaging you could actually reuse, to layers of plastic around almost every food your family eats, a yellow bin that hides how little really comes back, and a culture that blames individuals for not rinsing hard enough instead of questioning why there is so much rubbish in the first place. You do not have to become perfect. You just have to stop being the easy customer this system is built around. If this video made you look at your yellow bin and all those 100% recyclable logos on your groceries a little differently, tap like so more Australians can see past the recycling illusion. If you want more deep dives that protect your plate, your health and your family from the quiet tricks of our food and packaging system, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. That is how we keep making videos that actually have your back. Now tell me in the comments, what shocked you most? The roughly 12% real recycling rate, the 11,000 tons of hidden soft plastics, or the way brands can still slap green labels on almost anything? And what is the first plastic habit you're going to cut back on this week, beyond just being better at recycling?